This is Noah Tonneson, and I will be answering prompt 2 with Total Eclipse and Aces and Eights by Annie Dillard. In both of these essays, Dillard presents isolated scenes, as the question suggests. In Total Eclipse, she recounts a time when she witnessed a solar eclipse, while in Aces and Eights, she tells the story of her weekend trip to the mountains. But in both of these essays, Dillard takes the reader on her journey contemplating her own mortality. She thoughtfully places Total Eclipse as the first essay in the collection because in this essay she's forced to face her own mortality. She then chooses to place Aces and Eights as the final essay because in this essay she finally comes to accept the inevitability of her own death and embrace what that means for her. Dillard opens the collection with this abrupt crisis in Total Eclipse, and then closes it by coming to peace with this crisis in Aces and Eights. Without the element of Dillard's mortality to unify these essays, her experiences on her own would be insignificant and inapplicable to an average person. In Total Eclipse, just as the moon is fully covering the sun, Dillard's dull surroundings give her the perspective to consider the present as though it had happened long ago. While looking at her husband, Dillard recalls that the sight of him, familiar and wrong, was something I was remembering from centuries hence, from the other side of death. Yes, that is the way he used to look when we were living, when it was our generation's turn to be alive. As Dillard looks around her and sees everything drained of color, she's reminded of looking at images of the past in black and white. It's at this moment that Dillard first encounters the prospect that she too will eventually become a memory of the past. When she says, "when it was our generation's turn to be alive," Dillard is acknowledging the enormity of time in relation to her short lifespan. The realization of her own insignificance and how quickly time passes scares Dillard, and a few lines later she elaborates on this crisis. She writes, "We had all started down a chute of time. At first it was pleasant. Now there was no stopping it." Here, Dillard explains that life is pleasant at first, but once you realize how quickly it's passing, it's too late to slow it down. In Total Eclipse, Dillard is clearly having an internal crisis about her own life and the fact that death will come before she knows it. However, the essay ends with no conclusion to this thought as she goes to get breakfast with her husband. It isn't until the final essay of the collection that she will determine what this realization means for her. In Aces and Eights, Dillard continues the discussion of her own mortality, but takes a slightly different approach. Instead of relating her crisis to the reader using dark and overpowering imagery as she does in Total Eclipse, she instead often uses simple, declarative statements to convey her thoughts. She states things like, "There is nothing permanent except change," and "awareness of time is what makes us human." With both of these statements, there's a clear divergence from Total Eclipse in the way that Dillard feels about her eventual death. The more direct writing style indicates that she has considered these ideas extensively and come to terms with them. Having experienced her crisis in Total Eclipse, Dillard is now more aware of time itself and seems to ponder on events as they occur. "I hear the river outside the window, if I remember to listen," she says. While she was previously fearful of the thought that time passes so quickly, she has now accepted that fact and instead chosen to be more present, truly listening to the noises around her, for example. Later in Aces and Eights, Dillard remembers hearing the sound of the playing cards, which are representative of a dead man's hand, slapping against the spokes of her bike faster and faster as she travels downhill. She likens the girl's acceleration down the hill to the speed with which life passes, But this time she's not fearful. Annie Dillard's transformation from crisis to acceptance of her own death in total eclipse and aces and eights unifies the pieces and creates a coherent message that we should be more aware of time and remember to live life in the present.